This is the second update of story about the young girl who was excluded and uninvited from her parents' wedding. Link in the description for the first part of this saga. Now for the update. Sorry for not having re-updated sooner or commented. As you can imagine if you've seen my last posts, it's been a busy week to say the least. There's been a lot of people messaging me and commenting on the post, and I haven't had a time to answer to one until today, and I'm sorry for that. You all have been so helpful and caring for me and my story, and it's been truly eye-opening and terrifying to see how many people have gone through similar stories of neglect and abuse. And I just want to thank you all for taking time out of your day to send some kind words to this internet stranger. This update will be long, so sorry for that. I'm just going to continue where I left off. So my grandma called me to tell me she was coming here to see me and help me out. I was very stressed about it, because my grandma has a very hard time traveling. So for her to take this trip meant that she would be under enormous stress, and I felt responsible for her since I was the one that called her. She arrived early Monday morning with my uncle and I went to get her at the airport. Not gonna lie, it was a very intense and emotional moment, and as soon as I saw her, I ran to her arms and broke down sobbing. I don't even know if I was able to tell her anything at that moment because of how hard I was crying, and I had so many things to say. Thank you for coming, for being so good to me, for having my back. I'm sorry I have made you take this trip. I feel awful at home. I don't know if my parents love me, but I know you do. Am I an affair child? I truly was hit with all of this, plus the guilt and the anxiety all at once when I saw her. But she held me tight in her arms, telling me everything's going to be okay. My uncle hugged us as well. I don't know how long we stayed like this, but it must have been a while until my uncle told me we should get going. We grabbed a cab and went to their hotel. My grandma had teary eyes and I could feel her breathing heavily, which scared me, but she kept hugging me and smiling all the way. She had reserved a double room so I could stay with her for these days, and once they were settled in and I was more calm, we sat down and I poured everything out for them. The years of neglect and the emotional abuse, how I was feeling miserable after the trip but also for years now, how my parents have been trying to make me feel guilty for all of this that has happened, how I was scared about my future, but my number one priority at the moment now was to move out of that house, even at the expense of my schoolwork. How I have made arrangements to move in with my friend and I was looking for a job. I told them about this post and how some people thought I might be an affair child and that I was beginning to question that as well. It was a lot, and I could tell they were both really affected by what I was saying, but they kept comforting me and making me feel safe to open up to them. After I unloaded all my concerns with them, my grandma reassured me that I had nothing to worry about anymore and that she would be here for me always. First of all, she reassured me that I was not an affair child and that both my parents were thrilled when my mother got pregnant with me, and that she knew the ultimate deal breaker for my mom was cheating, and she believed it was the same for my father. Apparently, the favoritism began showing when I was around 3 to 4 years old, when my parents were constantly complaining about having a young kid in the house. And they were bothered because they could take my older siblings to their stuff but not me, and I was also very shy and a bit of a crybaby, which they had no patience with, and made me very different from my siblings. She told me that she knew that my parents had saved more than enough for my college. They're really well off, so that had never been a concern for me until now, thinking they might pull the funds away from me for my education, but that if they tried to not pay for my schooling, she would take care of it, and that she just wouldn't let me drop out because of money concerns. She also told me she would help me with rent and an allowance to move out. She was very generous, and I thanked her for it all, but I also told her that this experience had been eye-opening, in the sense that I never realized how privileged I had been economically all my life. For all of their faults, my parents have pampered me money-wise all my life. I went to private school. I have a rather large monthly allowance. I've had a card for years now, and they have never objected to any of my expenses. Seeing the stories here, I realized how good I've had it so far, and how being dependent on them all my life made me so exposed to losing everything. I want to be independent now, not just from my parents but from everyone. I feel like I need to learn to stand up on my own. Writing this and having just read all the stories of people in truly awful situations makes me feel like I've been a spoiled brat all my life, to be honest. She insisted on me accepting the help until I don't need it anymore, and I accepted that. but I still will look for a job and try to make it out on my own. We relaxed for a while in the hotel because we were all exhausted from the morning. But in the afternoon, we grabbed a cab and went to my house. My parents were extremely surprised to see my grandma and uncle with me when I entered the door. But before they could say anything, my grandma told me to go pack all my essentials while they talked to them. I rushed upstairs and I could hear my grandma and uncle berating my parents for all that they had put me through. At first, I also heard my parents trying to defend themselves, but eventually they quieted down. When I came downstairs with 2 suitcases and my backpack full to the brim with everything important that I had in my room, they were all in the living room. My father was beet red and my mother was sobbing like a child. And when she saw me, she extended her arms in my direction saying she was sorry, but I just said, "Save it," with the coldest tone I could muster. My dad said that I didn't have to be a jerk, to which both my uncle and grandma told him to shut up. I left the house at that moment and waited for the cab outside. In the hotel, my grandma reassured me that I wouldn't have to go back to them, and that they told her my college tuition was never in question for them, and that they had planned to throw me an extravagant birthday party to make up for the wedding mess, and were going to be giving me a car as an apology for everything. But my grandma was having none of that BS, because it was pretty obvious to her that they were only trying to save face, and they were coming up with these things on the fly, and that a party and a car would not make up for all that they have put me through. Apparently, the moment that broke my mother was when she told her that I had even questioned my paternity, and she started crying then. My grandma told her that what else could they expect when they had excluded me repeatedly from all family events since I was a child. She told me that she would make sure they made the payments to my school, unless I preferred to completely cut ties with them and have her pay until I can pay myself, and I asked her to do that. I felt bad because I feel like it's not her responsibility. But I truly don't want anything else from my parents anymore. And although my grandma is pretty well off herself, she's not as wealthy as my parents. But she reassured me that everything is all right, and that everything going to me would be taken away from my mom's inheritance. So the next day, we went with my friend, her parents, and grandma to the studio where we were planning to move, and immediately upon arriving, my grandma said, "Absolutely not." I knew from the pictures that the studio was very, very small and dirty, but we saw water damage and mold in the bathroom and kitchenette, and there was also rust in the little old appliances. I knew all of this beforehand, but I figured I could live with that, at least for a while. But the thing that the adults pointed out that actually made me and my friend change our minds was the fact that the studio was street level in a bad neighborhood, in a building that didn't seem particularly safe, and had bullet holes on the walls, which I didn't even know what those were until my friend's dad pointed it out. So Grandma and my friend's parents said they would look for an apartment for us in a better location and they'd help cover the costs. Both my friend and I want to be independent, but we realized that with our most likely minimum wage jobs in such a high-demand area, we won't be able to find anything better on our own. So the plan is, we're going to look for a 2-bedroom apartment, and me and my friend are going to pay what we had previously planned for the studio, and our parents and my grandma will cover the difference. I know it's still quite spoiled of me to expect that help from my grandma, but after seeing the studio in person, I truly wouldn't have felt safe there. My friend's parents, who were somewhat aware of what I was going through, told me that I could move in with them until we find a nice apartment, to which I'm extremely grateful since Grandma's going back in a couple of days and I've been staying in the hotel with her ever since. Apparently, my friend, her parents, and my grandma spoke about this before coming to me to make sure I had some safe place to stay until we move into the apartment, which is still to be found. I teared up a little as I thanked them, seeing how people were rallying behind me to offer help. Since then, I've been moving some of the stuff I had left at my parents' and setting my space in my friends'. My mom keeps crying and apologizing every time I go back, and even my father has said sorry, but I remain distant and cold towards them. My sister called and said that our mother was a mess, and that I was a prick for what I had done, but before she could say anything else, I hanged up the phone and blocked her. I was going to block my brother as well when I saw that he had sent me a very long message apologizing again and again for all that he has done to me, and for not realizing our parents were treating me so poorly. He says he's been doing a lot of self-reflection on the days since Grandma called and realized that he had been in the wrong for assuming that I wasn't on the trip because I wouldn't want to go, and for just allowing my parents to exclude me for all those years. I sent a brief reply thanking him for his words, but telling him I need space and I was not ready to accept his apology. I feel like he might be genuine because he has never been nasty to me the way my sister has, just aloof towards me, but I also feel like I need to keep him away for the moment. Also, keeping a bridge up with my family feels like the right thing to do right now that everything is so fresh. Maybe in the future he will show me he's just as nasty as everyone else and I block him. But as long as he respects my boundaries, I feel better not cutting him off completely. I've also made an appointment with a therapist who specializes in neglected teens, and I have my first preliminary visit next week. Again funded by my grandma, which makes me feel ever more eager to find a job ASAP to take the burden off of her, even if she tells me time and time again she is happy to do all of this for me. That's where things stand right now. I don't know if I'll update again, maybe when I start classes or move to the apartment. But right now, I'm just trying to enjoy some time with my grandma and my uncle and learn to grow and get rid of these feelings of guilt and depression that have been plaguing me for so long. I want to thank once again all of this community for being so nice and helpful to me, and all of you who have messaged me with your own personal stories of getting kicked out or having to learn how to make it on your own at a too early age. You've helped me feel a lot less alone and made me realize that things can get better if I work hard for it. I feel kind of spoiled for having such an amazing support system on my grandma, uncles, and my friend, but you all guys are right. Reaching out has been the absolute best decision I could have taken. And opening up about my feelings to those who love me and to all of you internet friends has absolutely saved me. So thank you. Really, I'm more grateful than words can ever tell. Now for some comments. This tale so far has been one where all I can say is, go grandma! Wish I had her on my side. Mine crucified me. I really hope the next update is one of reconciliation and family coming together, as I am so burnt out with the nastiness of things like this. Wishing you only the best, OP. I'm curious, when you've gone back to collect things, what exactly have your parents been saying? You mentioned they were apologizing, but is it more along the lines of, I'm sorry, forgive me? Or are they specifically saying, I'm sorry for XYZ? I'm just trying to figure out if they're apologizing because they were called out by your grandma, or if they genuinely recognize their own mistreatment. It may not matter right now, but understanding this could be important if there is any hope of salvaging the relationship in the future. My mother has been crying every time I've gone there, and just saying I'm sorry over and over again. But I haven't had a conversation with her, so she hasn't mentioned specifics. But I also haven't given her a chance. My father has been mostly silent, staring at me whenever I come and go, but when he apologized, it was more along the lines of, I'm sorry for everything than bringing any wrongdoing for his part in anything. I don't know if they are shocked right now by everything that's happening and haven't had time to process. I myself feel overwhelmed, or if they don't think they've done anything wrong and are just acting for grandma. I don't know myself, so I can't really answer. Last story. Am I the a-hole for kicking my parents out and saying this is why I was so messed up as a kid? I had my parents in their 60s over for dinner this weekend, and after, my daughter 10 asked if she could play us a song she had been practicing on her keyboard. She gets lessons. It wasn't perfect. A few missed notes, a couple pauses, but she did really well. She looked up at the end, massive smile, and I started clapping. And my parents started freaking laughing. Not just a little chuckle, a massive freaking belly laugh. Them both. My mom asked if it was her first time playing it, and my dad said it had to have been. It all could have played that better. It was like my daughter was shrinking on the spot, and she looked down and said, no, I've had 2 lessons, but doing it with 2 hands is hard. And they just laughed even freaking harder. I just stood up, took their cups, and said leave. Now, my mom tried to say about how they hadn't finished their drinks, they wanted to hear another song, etc. And I just said, get your stuff and get the heck out of my house right now. My dad started doing this huffing thing he does when someone dares to speak up to him. And my mom said that there was no need to be like this, that I can't protect her all the time, and she's preparing my daughter for the real world. I said, it's not teaching the real world, they're just nasty little bullies picking on children. And crap like this was why I was so messed up as a kid. Now leave. They got their stuff and left. I sat with my daughter and explained how proud of her I was and how well she was doing. To ignore them, they were just being cruel because they don't know any other way to be, and asked if she could please play it again, which she did. On the Sunday, I messaged and said that until they can behave like decent human beings, that we're taking a break away from them. My dad replied that it was my choice, but he didn't realize he raised me to be so precious. Now, my lovely brown-nosing golden child of his sister is getting involved. She phoned me today with my parents' versions of events, telling me I was a nasty piece of work and should never speak to my parents that way. That I'm wrapping my child in cotton wool and blah blah blah. I just told her to go F herself and hung up. I'm not asking if I am in the wrong for standing up for my daughter. I'll always do that. But I did go pretty 0 to 100. I kicked them out straight away. I swore at them and in front of my daughter. I did raise my voice at the end when I said leave. I was and still am angry. I don't think I'd even accept an apology from them at this point. This behavior isn't new, it's decades old. But this is the first time it affected my daughter. Did I go too far? React too much? Should I have tried to be calmer? Talk it out? I don't know. Am I the a-hole? Edit. Lots of people think I'm a mom. Nope, single dad. Not a-hole. Your daughter is never going to forget you standing up for her. Not a-hole. Absolutely correct. She'll see you as an ally in life now. She'll also realize that it's okay to not accept people being awful to you. 2 very enthusiastic thumbs up for your parenting. Yes, OP is not the a-hole. You stood up for your daughter and protected her from cruel, unnecessary comments. Your reaction was wrong, but it's understandable given your parents' long history of hurtful behavior. You're breaking the cycle and prioritizing your daughter's well-being. There's no need to tolerate that kind of treatment, especially when it impacts your child. Not the a-hole. You are correct. They are just nasty little bullies picking on children. What normal human would belittle a child's attempt to perform for them? I know 3 people who never need to darken your door again. It was how they always were. Anything I did while growing up was picked at or laughed at. I couldn't let my daughter feel how I did. The world is only as cruel as the people you're with. You're making the cruelty they're supposedly preparing her for. I'm really happy for you that you recognized what was happening and stood up for your daughter.